Tom and I and Luis, we're surrounded by people who are at this point in their lives at No Barriers where they have lost hope. Veterans who are contemplating suicide, caregivers worried about the loss of their loved one, kids struggling with mental illness. And you would think when you're around all this pain and suffering that it would actually be debilitating and hard work. But in fact, that couldn't be farther from the truth. It is uplifting work, because what we find is that in our darkest moments, when all hope seems to be lost, that there is still something inside of us that we can tap into to get through it. Yeah, well, today what Tom and I want to do in the next 15 minutes is take you on a journey to meet other extraordinary people who have shown Tom and I the way through the darkest times in your lives, a way to find hope and optimism and build your rope team when you're in your most difficult moments. Back in 2001, there was a team of 21 climbers who accomplished an incredible feat. They put more people on the top of the mountain from a single team on a single day than any team in history. And what's perhaps even more extraordinary is that one individual on this team was blind, completely blind, Eric Weinmayer, who's one of the co-founders with Tom and I of this No Barriers movement. This is him pictured on top of Everest. He arrived that day in this little brief moment of sunshine where the wind is whipping, it's freezing cold, you can barely breathe, and he had a moment to just sort of bask in the glory of this success. But keep in mind, he couldn't even see what was around him because he's completely blind. Just a handful of minutes to appreciate 7 years of training, a lifetime of mental preparation, and a feat that only 10% of Everest climbers ever get to the top. Time magazine described this in this way when they put Eric on the cover. They wrote, "There's no way to put what Eric has done in perspective because nobody has ever done anything like it. It's a unique achievement, one that in the truest sense pushes the limits of what man is capable of." You see, when it comes to adversity and how we tackle it, there's an important principle to keep in mind. And it's best stated, I think, in the words of Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And this is how he wrote it. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space, we have a choice. And our choice is our freedom.
We talk about the rope team, but what we mean by that is this group of people that you trust who are linked together to encourage each other forward on their journey. It's this support team of people that you can't live without. And while the name comes from the world of mountaineering, it really speaks to this critical responsibility that we have to one another, to make sure that we're caring for one another and making sure that even non-mountaineers, ordinary people like Dave and I, are always there for each other. And Dave and I, we've known each other for a long time. We've known each other since we were 12. And so you could say that we've always been on each other's rope teams. But the truth is that the rope has been made tighter through some unusual sometimes, but always trust-building trials. Well, 15 years and one pet cat later, I'm on a business trip and I get a call, the type of call that no one ever wants to get. My mom had suffered a massive stroke. I caught the next flight home and I rushed to the hospital. And as I entered her hospital room, my legs crumbled underneath me and I kneeled at her side. This woman had been the brightest light in my life, and now she was gone. Dave immediately flew in to support me through what was the toughest week of my life, helped me regain my footing, and ultimately take some steps forward. Soon after he returned from his visit to help me, he and his wife were at the 22-week appointment for their second child on the way. At that appointment, the doctor informed them that there was no longer a heartbeat. Because how far along the pregnancy was, they needed to spend the next day at the hospital to go through the delivery process, which only compounded the emotional suffering. Even in the womb, this child already was so loved by Dave and his wife. Now they had to unexpectedly say goodbye, all within a 24-hour period. Dave and I have spent years teaching and writing about this concept of rope team, but now we were forced to live it. A framework for breaking one's barriers in life can be somewhat esoteric until adversity just smacks you right in the face and brings you to your knees. And that's where we were at. We decided to get together to take a break from our jobs and our families for a short period of time. And while our suffering was different, our compassion for one another and our desire to help each other heal was the same. So we got together, we told stories, we did some hiking, and we learned to laugh again. And we discovered that while these activities were rather ordinary, our healing was significant.
And Tom, it was, in that moment where we had to try to envision this world that did not yet exist. And we were struggling to figure out, what are the steps you take to get through these dark times and still have hope and optimism and happiness and have a rope team. And it was in that moment that we remembered another superhero, Mandy Harvey, that perhaps everyone listening may know. Mandy was a performer on America's Got Talent in 2017. And when Simon Cowell hit the buzzer that sent her immediately to the finals, 500 million people around the planet were in tears. You see, Mandy, in addition to being such an incredible singer with perfect pitch, she also happens to be deaf. When Mandy got into Colorado State University to study music, it was as if her dream had come true. She had been playing music and singing since the age of 4, and she had this tingling sensation that finally her dreams were coming true. But 2 months into her freshman year, as she was sitting in one of her classrooms, she realized she was having a hard time hearing the teacher in the front. She went to an audiologist and discovered, to her great surprise and shock, that she had a rare genetic disease that was causing the nerves in her ears to deteriorate and that would cause the muscles throughout her body to deteriorate. 2 short months later, Mandy was completely and profoundly deaf. As you can imagine, Mandy went into a very dark period in her life. She dropped out of school and she lost all hope. Mandy, months later, was sitting with her father, and her father turned to her and said, "Let's play a song." He signed to her because she couldn't hear. She said, "Well, we can't play a song. I can't hear my own voice." He said, "Let's just give it a try." She starts playing the guitar and starts to sing, and she's watching her father's face, right? Because she can't hear her own voice. She needs to see what her father is responding, and she sees tears streaming down his face, and she thinks, "Oh crap, I must be terrible." That couldn't have been further from the truth. He signed to her and said, "You still have perfect pitch." That little glimmer of hope catapulted Mandy forward to her next big stretch goal, which was to play in front of others. She went and played at a cafe. It went really well. She played a full set at another cafe. It kept going better. She built a band. She learned to feel the music by putting her hand on top of the piano and playing music with her shoes off so she could feel the beat through the floor. Each successive success gave her more and more hope and confidence, and she built her rope team to get her further and further. And so when that America's Got Talent opportunity came up, she was ready for it, but that was years and years later. You see, one thing, when you meet Mandy in person, you'd be like, wow, how does this person have such extraordinary energy and hope? You fail to know, you don't see all the steps she took to get there. Every step you take matters, and it's the hardest steps that matter the most. Tom and I and Luis, we're surrounded by people who are at this point in their lives at No Barriers where they have lost hope. Veterans who are contemplating suicide, caregivers worried about the loss of their loved one, kids struggling with mental illness. And you would think when you're around all this pain and suffering that it would actually be debilitating and hard work. But in fact, that couldn't be farther from the truth. It is uplifting work, because what we find is that in our darkest moments, when all hope seems to be lost, that there is still something inside of us that we can tap into to get through it.
We know that there are many tools, there are many strategies that can help people who are facing adversity, and we've shared some of those today. But we have found time and again in our work with people of all walks of life that the single most important factor to help people break through their barriers is this: to have a purpose for your life that is greater than yourself.
So we'll finish here with reminding you all that we all have barriers in our lives, and we all have a choice to make about how we respond to those barriers.